damaged. 50%, 1,300 of the multi-storied buildings were turned into ashes. And these were the buildings where our residents were hiding from the enemy, aviation, artillery, the multi-launch rocket systems that were killing our citizens, our civilians, destroying our city. Our estimate, very conservative estimates, show that there are over 20,000 people killed, twice as much as in the times of World War II. Over the 2 years of occupation in 1941-43, slightly above 10,000 people were killed by the Nazis. In these days, 22,000 people were killed in Mariupol. So what does the Russian order or Russian world means for us? It means destruction, killing, and looting. When they seized the city, they were following the same approaches as Goebbels and Hitler did. They got ready for this war, and we are sure about this today because they quickly destroyed all the critical infrastructure. They destroyed 15 locations of electricity connections which provided electricity for our city. It took just a week for our city to be left without electricity, without communications, without central heating, without gas, and what's crucial, without potable water. Right now, this city is in the situation of humanitarian catastrophe. This terrible situation is exacerbated by the propaganda, and this is a fight that you journalists are fighting against, because the informational war is also a component of war, and we are also intending not to lose in this component of war. Everyone needs to hear the truth about the things that are happening in Mariupol these days. And this is a war of the greatest bloodshed in the history of Mariupol. Over 22,000 people killed. And right now this terrible situation is also exacerbated by something that was expected but is also terrible. This is the situation of the epidemic. It has so happened that over 22,000 people were killed. These killings were happening, but the locals didn't even have the opportunity to bury those people in the civilized way, so they were burying them in the yards, in the parks nearby. And right now it has created a network of such improvised burials. Sometimes these are quite big graves with multiple bodies in them. And now it's the beginning of summer, quite hot outside. So there is a terrible smell in the city, and these people who are held hostage by the Russian Federation, unfortunately, they have to breathe with this smell of death. They have to deal with a sewerage system that's not working. There is no system for the collection of domestic waste, and this is the very beginning of the terrible widespread of epidemic diseases, which can take thousands of lives of our civilians. So we are calling upon our partners, the Red Cross, the UN, etc., to save the lives of our citizens in Mariupol. Unfortunately, just like any other terroristic organization, the Russian Federation is holding them hostage. Since mid-April, the city was closed. And there is no possibility to leave from the territory they control. They encourage people to come and see if their property is still there, or maybe they encourage also people to sign documents saying that these destructions were made by the armed forces of Ukraine. The propaganda is still active there, but our Ukrainians, and we are grateful to them for this, are not following the Russians' advice. And it's very important for the world right now to know what Russia means. It means destruction, killing, and looting. Thank you. We can see some statements of the Russian Federation about the simplified procedure for providing Russian citizenship to our citizens in the occupied territories. Do you see that in Mariupol? I'll answer simply. We could see this experience when something was being planned on the 9th of May. They totally distorted this Victory Day that we were to celebrate, and people were taken off the streets, and they wanted to celebrate something, but our residents understand the situation. They did not want to partake in their celebrations. So right now they offer only lies. Who needs that piece of paper that they are offering? Speaking of the Ukrainian passport, it's a passport of someone who has experience. It's the passport that opens door to Europe, but the red piece of paper, it's a piece of shame. It's something one needs to hide in the pocket. So right now the locals do not support such attempts, and I'm grateful to the residents of Mariupol for understanding what is happening, for understanding that this is a crime, and understanding who is guilty. And these are Putin and his troops, and also the high political and military leadership that needs to be held responsible for the genocide that they are implementing. The filtration prisons. This is something that we are learning about from open sources. Do you have any information on that? Unfortunately, yes, there is a network of such filtration centers, and it is growing. So once again, the city is closed. There is almost no possibility to leave Mariupol for Ukraine, and there are over 100,000 people staying there. The occupational government is inviting more people to come and look what's still left, and they are keeping them there. It's my personal opinion that they are doing this. They are calling our citizens to protect themselves with their bodies, because they understand that quite soon we will be liberating our lands, we will be deblocking our city of Mariupol, and so they are trying to protect themselves with the bodies of Mariupol residents. I do not have any other understanding why this could be happening. Since the shelling of Mariupol has stopped, we are also getting some information about collaborationists. Is your team helping to collect the information about such people? Are you documenting it and transferring to the law enforcement institutions? Yes, we already have evidence of over 1,000 military crimes committed by the Russian Federation and the occupational powers, which are mainly represented by the opposition parties, which were elected by Mariupol residents, but they betrayed them later. How come it has happened that all the critical infrastructure was destroyed in just a week? This is because there was a very good understanding what exactly they needed to destroy. So, since the beginning of the war, we have established the hubs for bringing in the food, medicines, etc., and these hubs were destroyed too. When we were getting ready the evacuation on the 5th of March, they were asking questions about the locations and the numbers of buses that are provided for that. They collected this information and destroyed the buses in those places. We had about 100 vehicles. We wanted to do this internal evacuation, but they were destroying everything. They were inviting us to cooperate on this, and together with our military, our heroes, I requested the Russians to open the city to enable the locals to live. They did, and what did we get as a result? It's the Russian tanks, Russian artillery were coming in through these open corridors, and when the locals were living on their personal cars, they were coming to the very first Russian checkpoint, and they asked permission to leave, and they answered, no, we do not have such orders. We do not have the orders to let you out. And at the same time, the aviation, artillery, missiles from the ships were used against the city. And once again, the world needs to understand when they are saying that it's a liberation operation, we need to understand what was the nature of Mariupol. It was a multicultural city. Half of the city had Russian origin, most were Russian speaking, but this did not stop Russians from ruining the city. They did this on purpose. Why? Because in 2013 the city did not follow their propaganda. They wanted to create this so-called People's Republic of Donetsk. Mariupol was held hostage for 2 months, but then it was liberated. From this, we continued moving forward as a free, prosperous, blossoming European city. What was happening in Donetsk at the same time? Nothing was happening. And the second element here is also envy. They were envious of our development, our desire to live in the free democratic world. And now this was the reason they ruined our life. They have taken away everything from us, but we still have a dream and we still believe in the armed forces of Ukraine. first cities where such centers were established were Zaporizhia and Dnipro. These were the cities that host over 70,000 residents of Mariupol. We are doing this for them to feel this help. This is a place where residents of Mariupol work for the residents of Mariupol. Those who have left this hell are working now to support other residents of Mariupol with social, legal issues and other kinds of issues that are arising. Sometimes we are still having challenges, but we are working on this. There are doctors who provide some primary assistance. There are medicines that are necessary for our former residents. There are psychologists. There are children's rooms. There are also in these projects there are partners thanks to whom we are able to ensure the humanitarian component, which is very important in these centers. And right now, the residents of Mariupol are coming to those centers with great respect, sometimes just to have some communication, just to feel the spirit of Mariupol in those hubs, which are called I am Mariupol. So it was Zaporizhia, Dnipro, Vinnytsia, and Kyiv. And next week we are going to launch ones in Lviv, Odessa, Khmelnytsky, Ivano-Frankivsk, Kropyvnytsky, Uzhhorod, and other cities as well. So such hubs are going to be established almost everywhere around Ukraine, and yes, the purpose is for us to follow the residents of Mariupol. We are also establishing recreational centers for families that will be available since next month, and I'm very grateful especially to the mayor of Vinnytsia, Sergei Morgunov, who was the first to answer this call. And on the 13th of June, there will be the first teams, the first families of parents and children who will have this opportunity to take a break from this war, have some recreation here in Ukraine, and we need to continue working to save residents of Mariupol, bringing them back to normal life. Also, this morning we got some good news. A little boy, Yegor, we can share his name already. He was the author of the famous Mariupol diary. All the journalists were covering it. And he is in safety right now. He is in Zaporizhia. Can you share anything about him? Well, we still need to wait because everyone who has been to Mariupol these days, these are the people who have challenges with mental health. We need to work with them in this regard. This is why we have professional psychologists in these hubs that are being established, and it takes time. My mother, who was there in the drama theater, fortunately, she has survived, and on March 25th, she left the theater, and on March 26th, it was destroyed. Over 1,000 people died, including children and the elderly. So it took a week for my mother to just start speaking, and it's terrible when you are for a month or longer under this fire that doesn't cease. And since the very beginning of March, first day there was 1 aircraft, 2 aircrafts, 3 aircrafts, 5 aircrafts, and twice an hour they were bombing the city. It was their daily job. They were ruining and destroying everything. It's terrible. And when my mother has said that, okay, we believed that Grad and Smerch systems were the most terrible, later we understood we were wrong, because the air raids, the aircrafts were even more destructive. It was impossible to hide. Now, Dear colleagues, you have the chance to ask your questions. Please use the microphone.
Kristina Atovska from North Macedonia. I have a question. Yesterday our ombudsman was in Ukraine and he gave your government one interesting suggestion. Instead of Red Cross to be international group of ombudsmen who will visit the war prisoners and the citizens who are stuck and trapped in cities like Mariupol. Can you tell us what do you think for this kind of suggestions, because Red Cross is a humanitarian organization and ombudsmen in every country by the law they have obligation and right to visit imprisoned people.
I agree with this proposal 100%. This is a separate subject that exists right now. We have a volunteer organization that's been established. It's called Women of Steel. These are the wives of our heroes who have joined their efforts to save the lives of their husbands, those held hostage by the Russians and the so-called Donetsk People's Republic. Thousands of residents of our region, including the ones from Mariupol, are held there. We need to understand what is happening there. This information is coming through very briefly, but we are learning that Mariupol residents are held in small cells, 2 by 3 meters, where 10 to 15 people, men or women, are held. Once a day, they are let out to use the toilet. Once a day, they give them something they call food and some water. They are held there in terrible conditions. So we need to join the efforts and understand what is actually happened there, and to make lists and liberate the residents of Mariupol from those prisons, from being held hostage. We also know that there are already court rulings against those who disagreed to work with those occupiers and collaborationists. So the minimal term of imprisonment they give is 10 years.
With National Public Radio. Could you just describe what the streets of Mariupol are like? You said about 100,000 residents remain. Are people going out in the streets every day? Where are they going for food? Who is providing the food? Are any medical facilities still open? Are Russians patrolling the streets? Or are the streets mostly empty? Just a general picture of what the streets of Mariupol look like today.
Looking at the picture shown by the Russian propaganda, they are showing 3 places which have survived, and they are showing them at some particular angle. They are trying to make the impression that all is well in the city. But once again, almost every building, 2,600 buildings, are damaged, and it's 95% of the buildings in the city. 70% of the buildings had some direct hits of the artillery or aviation. 50% are the buildings that are entirely destroyed down to ashes. So every building was the hiding place for our residents. Over 20,000 civilians were killed. This is a very optimistic or very conservative assessment. Domestic waste is not being collected. Sewerage systems are not working. 100,000 people are held there. There is a smell of death because there are these improvised burial places. These are the words of the people who are staying there in Mariupol. There is not enough food in the city. What we can see in those propaganda videos and photos showing that somewhere in April they were delivering some humanitarian aid, but this was back in April. After that, nothing was happening. People are looking for food, and they are coming there and selling some food, but one needs to buy it for money. Where does one get money? The main problem in the city right now is the lack of potable water. There is none, because the entire network of the water supply and sewerage is destroyed. It is summer, which means high temperatures, which creates a terrible epidemic situation. There will be outbreaks of infectious diseases, and people are waiting near their buildings for the times when the so-called green corridors will be re-established for them to be able to escape the city. They are waiting for this, and we have to join our efforts to save the lives of our Ukrainians there in Mariupol. Thank you for joining us. Okay, last question.
Quickly, Valerie Hopkins from the New York Times. We saw even a few weeks ago on your Telegram channel and others Russian attempts to minimize what was happening in Mariupol. As I understand, they said, according to their official estimation, only 12 people died in Dram Theater. How worried are you about them destroying possible evidence, or not really being able to establish the full extent of the crimes that occurred? And what is your knowledge of the prosecution and the authorities' ability to start to prosecute crimes specifically that happened in Mariupol? Thank you.
Thank you. We are right now recording all the crimes of the Russian army and the self-proclaimed leaders, self-proclaimed government of the city. And speaking of the drama theater, we know we have the witnesses. We have several witnesses already who have said that there were over 300 people there. It was our assessment that there were 300, but they say there were more people there. So there are many crimes committed in Mariupol. We have 1,256 of them recorded, and the prosecutor's office, the regional and the national, are investigating them. These are military crimes, and people will be held responsible. Thank you. This was Madam Boychenko, the mayor of Mariupol, and in 5 minutes